An unnamed officer told the committee that GOP Senator Josh Hawley's fist pump outside the Capitol riled up the crowd outside that day. Listen to this.
As you can see in this photo, he raised his fist in solidarity with the protesters already amassing at the security gates. We spoke with a Capitol police officer who was out there at the time. She told us that Senator Hawley's gesture riled up the crowd, and it bothered her greatly because he was doing it in a safe space, protected by the officers and the barriers. Later that day, Senator Hawley fled after those protesters he helped to rile up stormed the Capitol. See for yourself.
So he's running away, right? He's out there fist bumping, and then you're running inside the Capitol to try to protect the people inside of that Capitol. After he does this fist pump, like he is so brave and so strong. What'd you think of that?
I thought he ran like a coward, but like many people in Trump world, he performs when he's in front of a camera, and he acts very differently when he is not.
Don't you think that is a lot of the people who did similar, who voted not to certify the election, who are still denying that it was an insurrection or that there was that the election was, fair? Do you have that same sentiment about them? Because they did similar things.
Oh, absolutely. I draw this parallel sometimes when I talk about Donald Trump and his relationship to Vince McMahon, who, if you're not familiar with the wonderful world of wrestling, which I am from my youth, Donald Trump kind of brought the Vince McMahon playbook into his world of politics, and that, you have these individuals like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Josh Hawley that play a character and behave a certain way in front of the camera because they know it draws attention, and they know that there are a lot of Americans out there that that react to that, unfortunately, in a positive way.
Yeah. Well, as we call it down south, all hat and no cattle are all style and no substance. Michael, thank you. And again, thank you. We appreciate what you did for us and what you're doing for us here on CNN as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trump wasn't the only 2024 candidate that was kind of alluded to last night. Josh Hawley is also someone who is rumored to potentially run. And the committee went out of their way.
No pun intended. Sorry.
Yeah, running in two different ways. The committee went out of their way to show this video of Hawley, who earlier in the day had pumped a fist at the rioters, running through the halls of the Senate. You can see him there on the right as he comes down the stairs, running as all of these lawmakers were escaping the rioters that were descending on the Capitol. What did you make of that?
Well, there's also video from within the room of the hearing room where when he is shown running across the Senate floor, everyone bursts into laughter. It was completely gratuitous. Josh Hawley had really nothing to do with this, but the committee wanted to make the point that if you are going to be on the side of evil in this, you're going to be exposed. And so maybe it's for 2024, or maybe it's just because he was riling up the crowd beforehand, and then as soon as the crowd came in, he started running like a baby away. But it was pretty comical. The other thing that really jumps out now is what happens with Mike Pence. The evidence is so strong that Donald Trump was trying to put Mike Pence in jeopardy. And Mike Pence has had his lawyer testify, his chief of staff testified, but he has thus far, we understand, resisted testifying. I think these 8 hearings ratchet up the pressure on Mike Pence to come in and to explain what his perspective that day.
Pence was a hero of January 6th, and we saw more of that today when you had that. They put together the mosaic of evidence yesterday about how close the crowd came to him and the alarm and the danger, the radio transmissions, the danger. But he and the Republican Party, and this is what Kinzinger, when he said it's still out there, and what Cheney was talking about at the end of the hearing, he and the Republican Party have not really come to grips with what is still out there. And they're doing this triangulation. Cipollone did it too. He didn't have to stand behind executive privilege. He wanted to do enough to avoid criminal contempt, but not so much as to piss off Donald Trump. That is a test of courage that Mike Pence is now going to.
And by the way, I think very quickly executive privilege goes away when DOJ gets to Cipollone because. Well, I think they will.
Why?
I think they will because there's no executive privilege for misconduct. There's no executive privilege to conceal wrongdoing. And there's no question that Trump's dereliction of duty and his refusal to do anything is wrongdoing. This goes back to the Nixon case. So I think that DOJ will be able to pierce that privilege veil, and they will get from Cipollone all of the testimony.
It wouldn't be a Dan and Norm get-together if we didn't have at least one disagreement. We're friends, but we debate. If you look at what DOJ did, Dan, with Meadows, with Scavino, where they failed to charge, I think that there is a conservatism within the department, and they are very cautious. I fought with them when I worked in the White House at the Office of Legal Counsel. They're so protective, too protective of the prerogatives of the presidency. I think they may tread a little more lightly, looking ahead to a new Congress that is going to target Joe Biden and his administration, where they're going to want to use executive privilege as a shield. So I think it may be a slightly more complicated calculus.